Welcome back to today's episode on It Starts With You podcast, where I am so honored that we have Hooman Ghazanfari joining us. Hooman, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's such a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Oh my goodness. I always say this when I have guests because, of course, I bring on the coolest guests and we're always talking before I hit record. I'm like, wait a minute, we got to hit record so that we can capture all this great stuff we're talking about. So, really excited for a conversation with Homan today, with one of the big themes being around perseverance. And I know I've shared my story on the podcast before. A lot of the guests that I bring on have these incredible journeys and stories that they like to share, and we really use that as inspiration to figure out how can we move, not only just move through what we've been through, but also really thrive and come out the other side. And Homan does that for himself, but also for others. So Homan is a 25-year veteran of the fire service and recently retired at the rank of captain from the Sacramento Fire Department. Thank you so much, Hooman, for doing that for all of us. He has a Master of Arts in Executive Coaching and Consulting from Concordia University in Irvine. Hooman is also credentialed with the International Coaching Federation, so ICF, as an Associate Certified Coach. He has worked with clients in Sacramento and across the country. Hooman is passionate about connecting with people and creating an environment for clients to discuss their challenges and seek new opportunities for personal and professional growth. Absolutely love it. Fellow ICF coach here. So I love when we have other coaches on there who have that training and experience. So, Hooman, I'd love to really just start, everyone really likes to hear people's stories. So could you just share a little of your background and how you got in going from being in the fire department to now doing coaching?
So, I was an immigrant to this country. I came here from Iran about a year before the Islamic Revolution took place, and I spent 6 years in Oklahoma, and even that that was culture shock going from being in a different country, different culture, different language, food, and everything to basically being dropped into the Midwest of America, and so that was an adjustment period, and it was a very difficult time because it was my introduction to I guess racism. And it was during the hostage crisis, so it was a very difficult time to be an Iranian American in this country. And I distinctly remember a story around that the teacher asked me to stand up and talk about where I was from, and I talked about it. And I thought it was really cool, and I was this celebrity for a day, and the kids wanted to play with me at recess. And then they went home and told their parents. And the next day, I had it was different. I could feel it was different. As a matter of fact, one kid at recess who had said the day before that he wanted to play and wanted to be my friend, now all of a sudden wanted to fight me. So we spent some time in Oklahoma, and my parents recognized the need for us to move, especially after my dad had finished his PhD. So we had some family out in Davis who moved out to Davis, California. So that's where I grew up, and even my life at home was very difficult. There was some trauma associated with my upbringing, and so I think that early on that really shaped my self-limiting beliefs and really made an impression on me as to what I felt like I could do and could not do. I was told statements like, "You're never going to amount to anything. You're going to be homeless. You're going to live under a bridge. You're adopted." Awful things that no one should ever say to a kid, especially your own child. And so, um, having grown up around that, I think I was yearning for a family. And so when I was introduced to the fire service, I was volunteering as an ambulance cadet, and then I became an EMT. And then there was a lot of people in the ambulance company that were trying to get into the fire department. So that really became something I was attracted to because of the fire family and feeling like you belong to something where people supported you. And I was also wanting to help other people who are experiencing trauma because in the fire department, we catch people on their worst day. And so that brought me it really excited me about the opportunity to be a member of the fire service. So after I finished my EMT and was an EMT in the ambulance company for several years, I got hired at the fire department, and even that I couldn't see myself doing it. And then I started to read some self-help books, and the main one being, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are going to identify with this one, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It's a
Yeah,
famous one,
good
and
one.
yeah, a lot of people love that book, and it's like sort of the cornerstone of personal development for a lot of people. So for me, it really helped me identify what I wanted to do, like just visualizing it and coming up with a plan and putting a plan to action. So I just blindly did it. It's like, well, look, I'm going to follow this book says, whether it makes me rich or not. It didn't make me rich, because I was becoming a firefighter. But at the same time, it demonstrated the exercise of believing in something and coming up with a plan to exercise what you want to do so that you can accomplish what you want to accomplish. And I did that and I was successful. So I
Mhm.
was really proud of myself. But then there's always these self-limiting beliefs. And when I'd be around my family, they would get reinforced. And I was always sort of fed these negative statements that just stayed with me and they were very difficult. And I had a difficult experience in my mid 20s. I traveled down to Southern California with some relatives, and all along the trip, I mean, if you can imagine being in a car for 7 hours, and then imagine like having someone berate you and say all these awful things to you for those 7 hours there, and then on the way back. So I recognized after that the need for therapy. So I got some therapy and I started that self-improvement journey and the healing journey from that point. And so as I progressed throughout my career, I came up against these obstacles like, can I be a fire captain? Like, is it in the cards for me? And I had to really go back to my roots of my personal development and my skills and overcoming those beliefs that were running that you can't do this. And oftentimes we're looking for confirmation bias, right? Like if you don't think you
Mhm.
can do it, you're looking for that confirmation. So if someone says you can't do it, you're like, there it is, I knew it. And it's because it's already been embedded there by someone else, and now you're looking for it in the outside world in your current orbit of people.
Mhm.
So I was able to overcome that and promote to fire captain. I also met my lovely wife, and I had always wanted a family, so it was very important for me um, to have kids and provide them a better environment to grow up in than I had when I grew up. I wanted to make a difference, not only with my own family, but in the outside world as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, as far as transitioning to coaching, I I realized that I'd hit a glass ceiling in the fire department and that I wasn't going to promote any further. I realized that people feel better having their friends in the positions around them as their peers rather than promoting someone that may call things out. Let's just put it that way. And
Mhm.
so that's, and once I recognized that and I was able to make peace with it, then I realized I wanted to do something else. So I actually hired a coach. And as a
Mhm.
result of that process, I realized that at first I thought I was going to be mentoring new firefighters entering to the fire service, and eventually it morphed into being a coach and helping people overcome their own self-limiting beliefs based on the things that I had learned along the way.
Mhm. There's so many things that I mean I always love hearing people's story, and that's why I ask, because I know people listening to like just so many parts of your story that at different points I know people can resonate with, of things they've either experienced or that they've felt. And I already have a page of notes, Homan, of like, wait, we need to talk about this and this. So first of all, thank you for being open to share I know we know each other, right? So thank you for being open to share though with the listeners too of the podcast about some of the things that you've been through, because that underlying piece of having gone through trauma, and people have gone through varying levels of trauma in their life, some smaller and some really, really big, but most people can at least resonate with this idea of having some traumatic experiences and how that really shapes who you are. And you had many throughout your life, right? And so thank you for sharing that. And a couple of things, one of the first things that I want us to talk about is when you do have this sense of all of these things that have happened to you, a lot of people can get not only those limiting beliefs, but that sort of victim mentality, which is understandable, right? Given if someone's gone through so many things, to be like, well, all this stuff keeps happening to me. How did you move through that, where you went from, okay, all this stuff is happening, but now I'm going to do something about that?
For me, Julie, it started with I had to look past all that, right? That was all the stuff that was right in front of me. So what I had to do was look past all that and look at what I wanted. For example, if all these negative things are happening to me, whether they're failed relationships, getting fired from jobs, I had to look past all that and look at what do I want to accomplish? What do I see as my future? And when I was able to go around all those obstacles and reach forward for what I wanted, then it was like, then when the self-limiting beliefs started to pop up, then I had to attack them one by one. I had to process them in reality. And some of it was through therapy, understanding, because we had to go back into the past to understand where these statements were coming from. Like, who was it in the past who said these things that made them stick and made these obstacles pop up into my life? Because really, once those statements get embedded, your decision making gets a little clouded too. And that's what I'm working with people as a coach is identifying the philosophy that's running and then being able to trace it back to its origin and understanding that, for example, I'm not going to amount to anything might lead to me sabotaging myself at work, might lead to me lacking confidence at work. It might lead to me making bad decisions when it comes to investments or business because I'm looking for that reinforcement that it's not going to happen. But when I can look past that, when I can set goals and say, look, this is what I want to do. I want to get this promotion. I want my business to thrive. Then I can come up with a plan that I can execute and then when you're working with a coach, then you're processing those self-limiting beliefs all along the way so that you can clear the obstacles in your path so that you can get to the success that you want.
That's such a great tip. So it's like being able to, which sounds, we always say it's like simple but not easy, right? Like it sounds simple to be like, just look past them, and we know that that's a lot of work to go through that. However, if you're willing to do that, like to dive in and do that work, then it stops holding you back and you can move through it. And one of the other things that you mentioned, and I know that you've had to do this, and also I'm sure this comes up when you're coaching clients, is when you've got negative people around you reinforcing the limits that you already have on yourself, and how it's almost impossible, right, when we're surrounded with this like negativity. So what have you had to do, and how do you help your clients when they realize, they look around and they realize, wow, the relationships or the people surrounding me are keeping me stuck?
Yeah, that's a great question. That goes back to the confirmation bias piece that we were talking about earlier. When we have these elements in our history, these experiences that have been embedded in our mind and even to some extent in our body as far as the trauma goes, we have a tendency to seek out certain relationships or even work environments, right? Like people who get an abusive boss and they stay there, right? Like the boss is disrespectful, dismissive, they get overworked and underpaid. They get taken for granted, and they stay there. Well, why do they stay there? Well, in my experience working with people, it's always because it feels familiar, and they can't see themselves getting past it. And even workaholics, yeah, I remember having a client that her dad was a drill sergeant, and he got them all out of bed at 5 a.m. and they, by 6:30 their beds were made. It had breakfast. They might have even had to do some push-ups. We don't know, um, but that that was embedded in her mind, and so she was taking on extra projects, staying late, and not even negotiating or renegotiating or asking for overtime. But it was just part of what was embedded within her that she had to keep doing that. So when it comes to making decisions about who belongs in your life and who doesn't, we really have to step back from that. And this is where I'm really glad you brought up this question. I like to take people through the stages of grief. And oftentimes people will ask, well, we associate grief with the loss of a loved one. And I've been through that myself. But when we look at the stages of grief, it's more about the loss. And so when we can apply that to any situation that we're dealing with, then we understand that, for example, and we can go through them, denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance. But when we're
Mhm.
in that place of, for example, the boss that turns on us, right? Like we've been there for a few months, things have been going great. All of a sudden, the boss starts piling on extra work or extra projects, or they become more dismissive. They've changed, right? So at first we're in denial about it, like, oh no, I'm misperceiving that, and then we might start doing a little, start getting angry about it, but we keep that to ourselves. We don't get angry at the boss. We're just like just walking around, just stewing about it. Might even go home and take it out on our family or friends or the dog or whoever.
Mhm.
Then we start doing bargaining. Like, well, if I just try a little bit harder, maybe things will be different. And so we go through that a few times until we finally get to the place of acceptance of, look, this is what I'm dealing with. This is who this person is. They're not going to change. And so it's up to me to make a decision as to what I'm going to do next. Now, I used work as an example, but you can do that with relationships. You can do that with your friendships. It's the same mental exercise of going and just asking yourself, like, where am I at with this right now? And now with respect to, it takes a while to get to know people, or you can't just take one experience and go, oh look, I gotta split. This isn't working out.
Mhm.
But at the same time, when you have enough information, that's where people get stuck because they're just looking at, like, their circumstances, and they're stuck, they're processing it. And sometimes it's so hard to go through those stages of grief when, as we alluded to earlier, it feels familiar, so
Yeah.
you get clouded from being able to see those stages of grief and being able to see, for example, that you're in denial or that you're bargaining. It's so hard to see that. So having a coach there that can reflect that back to you and show it to you and say, look, this is what it is. Based on what you're telling me, because I'm not there with you, but based on what you're telling me, this is what it is. This is what you're dealing with. And this is like, and I don't say, and then by the way, or therefore you have to do this. I ask them,
Mhm.
what do you want to do with it? Because we need to hear it from the client. For them to hear it from me, like, well, it sounds like your boss is a jerk and you need to quit. Next thing you know, the wife says, well, or the husband says, well, what'd you do? You just quit? Well, the coach said to quit. Well, that doesn't fit for their family, right? They still have bills to pay, so we have to have a plan, a viable plan. But at the
Mhm.
same time, we put it back to the client. As you know, you're an ICF coach as well. We put it back to the client and ask them, look, what do you want to do with this? Where do you want to go with
Mhm.
this? And then help them understand and come to that conclusion that they voice it and say, yeah, this isn't working well for me. I need to make some changes in my life.
Yeah, and the word that was coming up for me while you were talking is just like this uncomfortableness, like this. We have to get comfortable being uncomfortable because all of these things you're talking about when we're looking at re-examining the people in our lives, and if it's a work relationship or a personal relationship, like that's not going to be comfortable because even
Right.
if it's a negative person, and like you said, even if it's somebody who's been, you know, mistreating you. There's comfort in the familiar. Like we're almost comfortable in this familiar sense of them treating us bad. Like we know what to expect. And so you have to get comfortable that it's going to be uncomfortable when you start to re-examine those relationships or the situation that you're in.
You're absolutely right. It's sometimes people are drawn towards that dysfunction, and even when it's not there, like I deal with this with when I'm working with teams on conflict resolution. when you start to get to the place where you're resolving the conflict, there's going to be people who protest. Ironically,
Mhm.
right? Like, okay, and
Yeah.
so that typically is because now they're uncomfortable because they were thriving with the dysfunction, right? They might have been the ringleader or they were, gossiping and stuff. And now we're bringing it back into a healthy environment. Now they're uncomfortable and they're trying to figure out how to stir the pot again and make it dysfunctional. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, because there's that just like this sense of, and also people tend to commiserate with each other, right? So that's how we get kind
Right.
of those toxic, like knowing you work with teams, too, that's how you get kind of those toxic cultures where a few people can really infiltrate, the energy of the whole team or even the culture of the organization.
You're absolutely right. But oftentimes you have smart people who will just sit silently and listen and just try and figure out where their alliance should be rather than speaking up and saying, look, we shouldn't be doing this, or like, I don't want to participate in gossip or any kind of unhealthy interaction at work. And so what ends up happening is the most outspoken person then becomes your default ringleader, and then people will either gravitate towards them or gravitate towards hopefully someone who is healthier. But then that becomes that tug of war, and then that's where you have to come in and identify the different mindsets that are running for if there's different factions, but also identify who that ringleader is, and really try to draw out from other people, like, what's your experience like here? And you may have to do it in a separate setting just to get the information, but to get them to speak up and say, yeah, look, I don't agree with this. And it's hard because now you risk being ostracized from the group. And that's really the fear, I think, with those team dynamics when people don't speak up is, look, I just want to go along to get along. I don't want to be an outcast. I don't want to alienate myself from the group. So I'm just going to try and like just leave this alone and hopefully it'll go away. But oftentimes it doesn't, especially in those moments when they've hired a coach to come in. It's because things have sort of left their container.
You're going to ruffle some feathers, right?
For sure. Sure.
But also, what I hear you saying for yourself and for those that you work with, it's everyone really taking ownership too of their piece of this, because all these things you're talking about where you need to kind of call all your own stuff to the table. Like if you're working with people and they've got traumatic things that have happened and they have self-limiting beliefs and they're surrounded with people, like you have to call up your own stuff to be able to own it. And because I'm sure you worked with clients who you're like, you just keep getting like hitting a wall almost because they're not willing to go there yet.
You're 100% correct. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier about like like what well, I guess owning your stuff and owning what's going on and what's coming up. I'm kind of jumping, but um, we have to be able to take responsibility. Oh, this is where it was. We were talking about people who become victimized and how do we get past that? And when you become victimized, it is something that was probably out of your control, and you were in a helpless place. So you stay in that helpless place, and then that's where that statement you made earlier about these things happen to me. Why are these things happening to me? They're happening passively, and we feel like we're not in control. So when I'm working with clients, I'm helping them understand you are 100% in control. You're in control, you're responsible, and that's so important for them to grasp because it empowers you to make better decisions, empowers you to understand that, look, this happened to me in the past. That's not who I am today. I'm a grown adult and I can make better decisions and I can be more mindful of what's running and what led to those poor decisions in the past that didn't create the outcomes that I was looking for so that I can distance myself from them and take responsibility and accountability and make better decisions going forward.
And what do you see from those you're working with of how they come out the other side? So when people are able to take that responsibility and realize that they do have control, even though we feel like things are outside of our control, when they've done this type of work, how do you see them change and evolve on the other side of that?
I'm always surprised by the outcomes. Um, honestly, people typically they've had some epiphany as part of the journey of working with me as their coach. Probably several at different stages of our work together. But then when I check in with them after the coaching process is complete, you start to realize that when people feel empowered, they are going to make decisions that, I wouldn't have predicted or maybe not predicted happen so quickly. And so I'm always pleasantly surprised by that. And I've had several people who have quit. They've said, look, this isn't for me. I'm, going to take on a different job or I'm going to take a break. And I didn't see it coming because, like we talked about with the lady that was my client, she was on that hamster wheel and I didn't see her getting off anytime soon, even though we'd done the work and she'd realized that everyone's timeline is different. But I was pleasantly surprised by that. So yeah, typically it's that sense of relief, that sense of higher sense of self-awareness about the world around them, and that they're able to spot things more readily and not react to things the way they used to. And I think that's the part that really is gratifying for me as a coach when, like, because I'll catch them too.
Mhm.
Like we'll be talking about a Zoom meeting they had or something, and they'll talk about kind of in passing about like, um, oh yeah, and then so and so from finance was rambling and stuff, and they'll try and like just gloss over it. I'll say, wait a second, like 3 months ago that was triggering you and now you're just talking about it as if you're
Mhm.
watching a movie.
Mhm.
so so that's the gratifying part, and even helping them see it. Like, look how much you've changed in the last few months, and then sometimes they'll kind of pause and they'll look around and yeah, you know what, you're right. I'm not the same person. I don't react to things the way they used to. Whether there are things at work or in my personal life, my relationship with my spouse, I'm able to be more grounded and stay in the moment and process things in real time and not let them get to me.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so, yeah, because as a coach too, there's so many instances where, because we don't have control either, which I think is one of the hardest parts as a coach too, is like you don't have control. Like everyone, you want so badly for them to get whatever it is that they want, but we don't get control either because it's, fully showing up, you're fully showing up, and like they being whoever it is you're working with, they have to fully show up too. And then there's just these unexpected things that happen that all of a sudden you're like, whoa, okay, let's talk about that. And I think that's the fun part is you just never know because it's everyone, and sometimes you don't even realize what they've all gotten out of it until all of a sudden they make this big decision and you're like, "Whoa, let's talk." Like how did you get there? So I think that's like the really fun part of that. I'm curious, Holman, so if someone's listening and they're feeling, there's a couple of things. Like someone might be listening and feeling like, "Wow, ooh, I've gone through some traumatic things and I don't think I've really unpacked them all yet." Or maybe they're sitting there thinking, like, okay, yeah, I have these limiting beliefs. I mean, we hear that word all the time, right? So not only did you have them yourself, but they were reinforced by the people around you. It can feel really overwhelming of like, what's the first thing that they should do? So I'm curious, do you have like one thing that somebody listening, if they've got really strong, heavy, like limiting beliefs of themselves right now and these limits, like what's like the first step that they could take?
Well, it starts with you. No.
Yeah, right?
But it does. You have to check in with yourself. You have to be vulnerable. So if I was going to put it in one word, it would be vulnerability. And there's vulnerability with others, right? Like when
Mhm.
you hire a therapist or a coach, that you can just sit down and just lay this stuff out there. And, because you and I have both had clients that come in and they're deflecting, right? Or they're defensive, or they want to filibuster
Mhm.
the whole session, right? They're there for 60 minutes and they want to talk the whole time because they think if they talk the whole time, then you can't come in and ask them about things and start to get into the deeper layers of issues. So when you can be vulnerable and check in with yourself, check in with what's coming up for you, and look, yeah, it's going to be some of it's going to be anger.
Mhm.
That's okay. That's okay because what's underneath all that anger? It's sadness. Like we especially the bigger the ego, the more the anger, because we can't let that sadness bubble up and show to the people around us. So sitting with that sadness about what happened, sitting with even the anger, processing the anger, so hopefully you can get to the sadness, and then reaching out for help. Like you don't have to do this yourself. I couldn't have done this by myself. To get to where I am, retired at the age of 50. I enjoy the work that I do now. I have the schedule that I've always dreamed of as far as having flexibility and being able to play golf, play tennis, which I'm awful at both, and that's okay.
Hey, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but being able to process what's coming up and staying in touch with your own emotions and that vulnerability is such a big part of a lot of this stuff is being able to just understand what's coming up and then being able to voice it, being able to share it with and this is part of that test. I'm going to tie this back to the people in your life. This is part of that test for the people in your life. Can they help you out with this? Can they support you? Can they at least stay with you in the moment and help you process what's coming up? Whether you're hurting, you're experiencing grief around something, whether it's a relationship or a job, or are they dismissive? Do they tell you to suck it up? Do they, do they push away like, hey, look, I didn't sign up for this? Like those are some of the tests that we can apply coming from a genuine place that help us understand how people fit into our life and what we need to be able to overcome what's holding us back and some of the emotions that we're having.
And one more thing I want to talk through before I wrap up, because I was just thinking about while you were talking. I'm just kind of curious. So we're really talking about people who have had these, there maybe some trauma, limiting beliefs, all of those things, and what they can do. But if somebody's listening, because I know this is a big conversation, either individually or also in organizations as well, who someone that they know has had something traumatic happen, or maybe they realize that they have some, they're stuck, there's some trauma that they've gone through, and you don't know how to be around them, you don't know how to support them. Or I'm curious if you have any instances like that, like for either when you were going through it, like what could people have done, what would you have wanted people to do, or even for clients when they're like, they're like, hey, there's someone else that I know just is going through this thing. Like, what can I do?
Yeah, so oftentimes we keep our distance because they may make us feel unsafe, right? Because if they're being vulnerable, then they're inviting us in. But if they're sort of explosive or irritable or what have you, people oftentimes will keep their distance. So in those instances, if I was coaching someone on it, I would remind them that they're safe and that hopefully if they come from a vulnerable place, rather than saying something like, "Oh, what got into you?" or "What's your problem today?" or something like that, just being able to say, "Hey, I get the sense that you're really upset about something. Like, do you want to talk about it? You want to get a cup of coffee? I'm here for you." And I could have used someone like that, and I actually did have a few people that I was able to reach out to sometimes after critical incidents at work, where we did just go and sit and have a cup of coffee and talk, and I was able to just sort of empty out, and that was very helpful. And of course, as part of the therapy process, which I would also highly recommend as well, especially if you've had a traumatic experience, that was very helpful too, because it helped me to lighten the load that I was carrying and help me process it with a mental health professional so that I could just let some of it go and being able to have some perspective around like these are like because I was part of the stress debriefing team and we would describe them as these abnormal events that happen to normal people. So helping people understand that look, this happened, you were there for it, and you're a human being, you're going to have a reaction to it. And even with going back to your question, like, yeah, they're dealing with stress, and it may seem like a big deal to them, and it might, pale in comparison to what someone else is going through. But just being there with them and being able to stay present in the moment and remind yourself that you're saved so that you can come from a vulnerable place and sit with them and help them unpack what's going on.
Yeah, thank you for addressing that because I do think we, as a, like a universal we in a society, I think of getting better at better of creating these safe spaces for people. Like there's more pushes for mental health awareness and safety in the workplace. And it really came up to Holman because I was recently at a spa. My husband and I went to celebrate our anniversary, and I'm
Nice.
sitting around this fire at the spa, and we start talking to this couple, and this gentleman tells me he just retired from the fire department. He was there for 20, 25 years. And we started just chit chatting about this. And we literally started talking about mental health in that space and how much more open that their department at least had gotten to supporting people who have been through traumatic things and supporting these firefighters who've seen these things. And so we started this whole conversation, and we were talking. I was like, hey, how did you support yourself? He's got family and kids. I said, how did you manage your own self having seen these things? And so not only for our own selves but how we support other people. So I was thinking of you when I was talking to him.
Awesome. Awesome.
Oh, this has been such an amazing conversation. For everybody who has been listening, first of all, I hope you see how amazing Homan is, and make sure that you give him a follow, and we'll tell you where you can find him. But just so many great things to talk about. I think the idea of even having people on to say like, yeah, I see you. Like, I've been through these traumatic things too, and look where I am now. So that people can hear other people's stories, but also these great tips around like owning your own stuff. And I love how you talk about the stages of grief and sometimes really needing to think about that and examining the people in your life and who you're surrounding yourself with. And obviously getting, a coach, and when you need a therapist, and having multiple people on your team to support you through these things. And one thing too that I want to make sure that we kind of wrap with is you and I have been talking about this idea of perseverance. And
We have.
so tell me just a little bit about what stands out for you about that word. Like, what does perseverance really mean and look like?
I think perseverance for me is, gosh, this is gonna be a hard one because I don't want to go through all these cliches
This
to
is
get to
the
my
fun part.
answer. um, we're all gonna take punches, right? Like, if you're not taking any punches in life, then you're really not. You're staying home with your. I guess these days it's not your remote; it's your phone.
Yeah.
But if you put yourself out there and take some risk, whether it's a relationship, a promotion, a new business, there's going to be setbacks. Some of them be small, some of them be a hard no. You're going to have to pivot. And so perseverance for me is building those tools in your toolbox that no matter what comes at you, you're able to, absorb that punch, and keeping with that metaphor, and be able to move past it, to be able to understand that, look, these things happen. They happen to all of us. And that was one of the things that was such a powerful learning point for me, and something that I share with clients, especially when things come up that I've experienced before with other clients. It's, look, you're not alone. We're all, suffering on some level or taking punches when it comes to different things that we're trying to overcome. And so it's not about like, why did this happen to me? It's like, okay, if I can, and maybe even accessing a little bit of my stoic side, if I can just see this as part of life, of these obstacles that come up, then I can just look at what I want to do from here and how I can pivot to overcome it. And then building that toolbox where you have the grit, the tenacity, and the ability to. And one of the places I go to on a personal note is like, what are my options from here? And oftentimes I take the clients there too. Like, what are your options? And that's where sometimes I will, when I'm doing like coactive coaching, I will interject a little bit if I see some options that they don't see. I may ask them, have you considered this? Have you considered, something
Mm-hmm.
else? But it's sometimes we think our options are limited when they aren't. For example, a job. Like now, you may be at the end of your career and think, well, yeah, look, there's not that many options for me. There are always options for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's, and we don't have time for this. I know this is a whole other podcast, is scarcity mentality versus abundance mindset. But
Yeah.
like when we're in a scarcity mentality, it's like, this is it. This is my life right here in this little shoebox
Mm-hmm.
compared to the massive amount of abundance that's out there. I mean, you could go backpacking through Europe, say, screw the whole thing. I'm out of here. I'm going to go backpack through Europe and go do it. I mean, and live out of, stay in hostels, all that stuff. It's one of the options. There's options available to every one of us. But we have to look at what fits for our life. And that's where working with the coach, you can identify that.
Hmm. And I use that example. So I love the taking punches because I've said, I'm like, I've been punched down so many times, right? Like life's gonna knock you down. And how we can think of it is, oh, it's my turn to get punched down. And, next week it's Homan's. And like, if we realize that it's not just us getting knocked down, it's literally everybody. And the more that we all share those, it's like, oh, yeah, I got punched down last week and man, for the last 6 months, but now it's their turn. Like we're in it together. And then I think it helps to release that victim mentality also and creates more of a
Right.
sense of community with people and to go, okay, I can lay here in the dirt or I can get back up. And that's your choice, right? Which is so amazing of what you're sharing with your clients too, is like you do have that choice. That's your choice of how you do that. So thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much for your insights. Before we wrap up, Homan, anything you want to share with our listeners, what you're doing and where they can find you?
Do we have time for a quick story?
Yes.
Okay. So um, I wanted to, this is a true, it's not going to sound like a real life story, but it is a real life story. It happened to me. And it's around being able to um, visualize what you want to happen. So I was at the fire station and I was in my recliner, which we all have recliners at the fire station. And I was going through some clips and I came across one that was on YouTube. And it was, and at the time, I was a big Ted Lasso fan. And so it was the lady with the blonde hair, Hannah Waddingham, I think her name is. She had just won an Emmy. And so she was up there and she's thanking the cast and she's bringing everybody up and she's waving this thing. She said, wow, these things are so heavy. And I remember in that moment thinking to myself, I wonder what it's like to hold one of those things. Like she's holding this thing. So, and then it was kind of a fleeting thought, right? So, I kind of shrugged it off, like, oh, well, I'm never going to go to Hollywood and all this other stuff. So, about 30 minutes later, we got a call for someone who'd fallen out of bed. And we got there, and the guy's wife said, lived on the river, had a beautiful house. And they're arguing because he doesn't want to go to the hospital. She wants him to go. We got the gurney in there. We loaded him up, and they start taking him away. Well, I'd gone in the living room to admire the view, and I just turned around to see the rest of the house. And on this shelf, there was like four beautiful Emmys sitting there.
What?
So I picked one up, and I'm like, there it is. I got one in my hand. It's 30 minutes later. I swear to God, 30 minutes later, I'm holding an Emmy in my hand. And I don't even know how, I'm asking myself how I even got there, but there it was. And that to me was one of those mind blowing moments where you go, this stuff works. Like, I don't know how it works. I don't know how that happened, how all those things lined up, but this stuff works. So, the power of auto suggestion and
Mhm.
being able to visualize something is very powerful.
That is how did it feel?
It was kind of heavy.
That is such a cool story, and how crazy. And I bet though people listening, I can think of examples where I'm like, that totally happened. Something just like that, where you're like, oh, what if this? Or you kind of like, it's like however people want to call it, manifestation or creating your reality. All those things that you think about, but it happens. It's such a cool story.
It happens. It happens. So yeah, to your question about sharing, you can find me at my website, www.gazcoaching.com. That's GHAZ coaching.com. I'm sure Julie will be putting all the links in the show notes. You can find all my social media stuff on there. Um, yeah. So
And LinkedIn, give them a follow on LinkedIn.
yes, yeah, LinkedIn for sure.
Amazing. Homan, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your story, for helping our listeners. All of you, I hope this helped so much. Remember, the best way that we can thank Homan for coming on is to share this episode. Share it out. Let us know, tag us, let us know what really stood out for you. Send him a message and say, hey, thanks for just sharing that, or this really resonated. That really means the most to us who come on and do these podcasts. So thank you, Homan. Thank you for everyone listening. Remember that it starts with you, and remember that you can persevere through anything.